Okay, welcome back to Module 4. Here we'll be talking about environmental safety. We'll address concerns of potential stakeholders, outline what happens to pesticides in the environment, describe the principal environmental hazards, deal appropriately with pesticide spill, and take measures to protect non-target organisms. Okay, so who are stakeholders? Nowadays, stakeholder can be anybody. So it could be neighbors, employees, bystanders, beekeepers, people involved in outdoor activities, municipalities, and other levels of government. So, someone driving by and can smell a chemical in the air could be a potential stakeholder. So we just have to be aware that who stakeholders are and where we might find them, and almost everywhere. So precautions to protect the environment and stakeholders are related to the degree of risk to the environment and largely defined by the following four factors. So the toxicity to non-target organisms, volumes used, persistence in the environment, and then the mobility in the environment. So it's up to you to evaluate the impact of the intended application and to ensure that the product is used safely. We're going to talk about the fate of pesticides. So fate is what happens to a pesticide once it is released into the environment and is determined by the following properties: degradation, adsorption, absorption, and volatility. And we'll talk about all these. Okay, so here's, it's a bit blurry, but here is kind of a diagram. You got photodegradation, which is the breakdown by the sun. Okay, runoff, spray drift, so absorption, and then adsorption down into the ground, microbial breakdown, leaching, volatilization. Kind of gives you an idea of what's going on. So degradation is the breakdown of pesticides into other compounds. Okay, so they're broken down by organisms in the soil or soil microbes, chemical reactions, so temperature, pH, etc., and sunlight, photodegradation. So three methods that they can be broken down by or degraded. Adsorption and absorption. So adsorption refers to a pesticide being retained on the surface of some kind of material. Absorption refers to a pesticide being retained within some type of material. Volatility. Pesticides that tend to vaporize behave like gases. In the environment, this means they are present in the atmosphere where they can move considerable distances. Environmental hazards. Pesticide use can result in soil and water pollution. For the test, you need to understand that this may be the greatest conflict with the sustainability of agriculture. This is an opinion. It is a question that you're asked. So just keep in mind that pesticide use can result in soil and water pollution. This may be the greatest conflict with the sustainability of agriculture. And we've got some charts in Module 4, pages 4 and 5. You know, when you look at those charts, you can see 2,4-D is one of the highest detection. You got 2,4-D, Mecaprop, Picloram, you know, that chart gives you a pretty good idea. And then the chart on the box on page 5, you got 26 samples, 2,4-D, you know, so some of the largest samples would be your 2,4-D or and your chlorpyrifos. Okay, so dealing with spills. If you spill a pesticide, you must take appropriate action. You are responsible. Report a spill to Alberta Environment if impairment to the quality of use of air, water, and land, injury or damage to property, edible life, any adverse health effects, impairment to public safety, loss of enjoyment or normal use of property, or if it interferes with the normal conduct of business. So here's some pictures of some typical spill kits that you might find. These can be bought, you know, Greg's catalog, you know, you can buy these at Greg's, and I'm sure cost safety would have something like this. So you can see that these absorbent, I'm going to call them pads, or you know, these long pieces. Here's an example. If you have a spill near a drain, you would take these and put them around the drain to prevent anything going into the drain. You could use also soiled sand, sawdust. Once you've cleaned that spill up, then you have to put it into you know, into another container. So anyway, this is some pictures of examples of spill kits and stuff. Protecting the environment. Even low doses of pesticide can affect the behavior of birds, insects, and other animals, make them sick, sluggish, or disoriented. Secondary poisoning, excuse me, of non-target species occurs when an animal eats a poisoned pest and is itself poisoned. So example of a hawk eating a gopher or ground squirrel that's been poisoned with strychnine could be an example of secondary poisoning. Here's some pictures. So let's say, you know, this ground squirrel, you know, has been poisoned already, and then has been consumed by, you know, a hawk or, you know, an animal. That animal then is itself in danger of being poisoned, and that's what's known as secondary poisoning. Protecting fish and aquatic life. Most pesticides affect fish and other aquatic life if they're allowed to enter a water body. Most aquatic organisms are highly sensitive to pesticides in comparison to other species. So I've got this underlined here. So an example of this in the food chain would be ducklings. Can be indirectly affected by a pesticide if their food source, such as aquatic insects, are diminished. So maybe the chemical won't affect the duckling in a harmful way itself, but if it kills all of the duckling's food source, then the duckling is indirectly affected. There's this thing, some pictures of some dead fish. These didn't come in very clear, but you got small fish and eggs, grass, weeds, you know, different things that ducks will eat. So maintaining a buffer zone. Buffer zones consist of natural vegetation along riparian areas that are left untreated to reduce the chance of pesticides entering streams or lakes. On land that is not cultivated, pesticides cannot be applied closer than 30 meters from a body of water. So here's some diagrams of the code of practice. So, there's different chemicals that fit into these zones. So you have to be aware of those. So zone 1 is your lake and shore. Zone 2 is 0 to 1 meter. Zone 3 is 1 to 5 meters. And then zone 4 would be within that 5 to 30 meter mark. Okay, so here he's spraying out here. You got a body of water here. You got, this is a buffer here. So gives you an idea of buffer zones. Special permit must be obtained to spray within this 30-meter zone. For example, within 5 meters of a creek running through the farm where the natural riparian vegetation still exists. Also, if you go back to those charts on page 4, just for knowledge sake, it has been determined that 2,4-D and lorsban or chlorpyrifos residues have shown to exceed the freshwater aquatic guidelines within the areas of high intensity agriculture. Protecting bees and other beneficial insects. Poisoning of honeybees has been a significant problem in Alberta. Many insects besides bees are beneficial. Beneficial insects contribute to the decay of organic matter and cycling of soil nutrients and attack other insects and mites that are pests. So the important thing is to know the difference between beneficial insects and harmful insects. So here's some diagrams of honeybees. So this one didn't come out very clear, but so preventing bee poisoning. So if you know the local beekeepers near your area, be in contact with them. Don't apply near the hives. If you can help it, don't apply pesticides that will be toxic to bees while crops or weeds are in bloom. Mow cover crop and weeds to remove blooms prior to spraying. Select the pesticide formulation least harmful to bees. Timing your pesticide application carefully. Evening is less hazardous than morning, but both are safer than midday. So evening is the best time. Evening is better than morning, but both are better than midday for sure. Encouraging beneficial insects. So conserving or encouraging beneficial insects is important because they exist naturally and help to regulate pest densities. So these are some practices you can follow. So basically learning to recognize beneficial insects, minimize insecticide applications, use selective insecticides, maintain a margin around standing crops and crop residues. So here's a picture. These ones came in clear. So there's an example of a ladybug here, and she's feeding on aphids. So, here's an example of your beneficial insect feeding on the harmful insects. Praying mantis is also beneficial insect. Spiders are as well. This one didn't come in too clear. It's hard to make that out. Birds, protecting birds. Birds keep insect pests in check. You can do the following to protect birds. Use pesticides that are least toxic to birds. Spray only when the pest has reached its economic threshold. Avoid the use of granular products that are toxic to birds. Where granular or treated seeds are used, you can ensure they are covered by soil and that leftovers are properly disposed of. Protecting wildlife and livestock. Pesticide poisoning may injure animals by causing adverse effects such as weight loss, reproductive injury, or death. Pesticide residues can also accumulate in tissues of the animals, making them unsuitable for consumption by predators or humans. Livestock and wildlife can be exposed to pesticides directly or indirectly. Direct exposure occurs if an animal is sprayed during an application. Indirect exposure occurs if an animal drinks contaminated water, eats or rubs up against contaminated vegetation, or eats contaminated food. Steps to prevent animal poisoning. So be sensitive to the presence of wildlife and their young. Read and follow all label precautions regarding protecting livestock and wildlife. Use pesticides only when necessary. Select the least toxic and persistent of recommended pesticides and use target specific pesticides. That is the end of Module 4. So I encourage you at the end of these modules to continue to do the exercises, work on those questions. It will help you to better understand and prepare you for the exam.